Hi guys, welcome back to our audit class for week 7. So today we will have group presentation on new topic, which is audit using the works of others. Internal audit, ISEXIN, and Auditor's Expert, ISEXI. We are group 4 and we are excited to share with all of you about this topic. Without further ado, let's jump into it. Okay guys, here is our agenda that we're going to focus for today, and we will assist you on this topic. Are you guys excited? Let's start now. So first, what is internal auditors? Internal auditors is employees of the entity that provide direct assistance which could result in threats to independence, either in fact or perceived. Direct assistance is the use of internal auditors to perform audit procedures under the direction, supervision and review of the external auditor. And internal audit function is a function of an entity that performs assurance and consulting activities designed to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the entity's governance processes, risk management, and internal control processes. Time to move to the next part: activities related to governance processes, risk management, and internal control processes. First is activities relating to governance by assessing the governance process in its accomplishment of objectives on ethics and values, performance management and accountability, communicating risk and control information to appropriate areas of the organization, and effectiveness of communication among those charged with governance, external and internal auditors, and management. Secondly, activities relating to risk management by identifying and evaluate significant exposures to risk and contributing to the improvement of risk management and internal control, including effectiveness of the financial reporting process, and perform procedures to assist the entity in the detection of fraud. Last but not least, activities relating to internal control, which are evaluation of internal control by assigning specific responsibility for reviewing controls, evaluating their operation, and recommending improvements. For example, the internal audit function plan and perform tests or other procedures to provide assurance to management, and those charged with governance regarding the design, implementation, and operating effectiveness of internal control, including controls that are relevant to the audit. Examination of financial and operating information by reviewing the means used to identify, recognize, measure, classify and report financial and operating information, and to make specific inquiry into individual items, including detailed testing of transactions, balances, and procedures. Review of operating activities such as economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of operating activities, including non-financial activities of an entity. Review of compliance with laws and regulations and other external requirements, and with management policies and directives and other internal requirements. Let's keep going to the next section on the objective using internal auditors to provide direct assistance. There are 3 main objectives, which are to determine whether the work of the internal audit function or direct assistance from internal auditors can be used, and if so, in which areas and to what extent. Second one is to determine whether that work is adequate for purposes of the audit or not, and to provide direct assistance to appropriately direct, supervise, and review their work. Here are the benefits relating to provision of direct assistance by the internal auditors. Strengthened relationship between the external and internal auditors. External auditor can gain additional insights. External auditor can use internal auditors who may have relevant expertise in particular areas. And external audit team can focus more on the significant audit issues. Next, we go to the criteria for internal audit that external auditor can rely on. 1. Competence. Effective audit execution relies heavily on the competence of internal audit staff. This requires not only appropriate educational qualifications, but also relevant experience and continuous professional development to handle the complexities of audit tasks effectively. 2. Systematic and disciplined approach. A systematic and disciplined approach refers to the adherence to established methodologies and standards in conducting audits. This includes following a structured process for planning, executing, and reporting audit findings, which helps ensure that audits are thorough and that results are reliable. 3. Technical training and proficiency. Ongoing technical training is crucial for internal auditors to remain updated on changing standards, regulations, and best practices. This includes developing auditing skills and gaining industry-specific knowledge relevant to the organization. 4. Knowledge of financial reporting. Internal auditors need a thorough understanding of financial reporting standards and frameworks relevant to the organization. This expertise allows them to evaluate the accuracy and compliance of financial statements, ensuring they accurately represent the entity's financial position. 5. Sufficient appropriate evidence. The collection of sufficient appropriate evidence is crucial for supporting audit conclusions. Internal auditors must gather evidence that is relevant, reliable, and sufficient in quantity to substantiate their findings and recommendations. 6. Consistency of conclusions. Internal auditors' conclusions must be aligned with the evidence gathered and the audit procedures conducted. This consistency is vital for maintaining the integrity of the audit process and ensuring that stakeholders can trust the findings and recommendations provided by the internal audit function. Let's look at aspect can be relied upon internal audit under ISA 610, focusing on when and how external auditors can trust internal audit work. 1. Risk assessment. Internal auditors play a key role in identifying and evaluating significant risks, helping to strengthen risk management and internal control. External auditors can use these assessments to understand the entity's risk landscape and focus their audit procedures on the high-risk areas. 2. Detection of fraud. Internal auditors conduct procedures to detect fraud, and their findings are valuable for external auditors. These findings help external auditors assess the risk of material misstatement due to fraud and adjust their audit procedures accordingly. 3. Evaluation of internal controls. Internal auditors regularly review and evaluate internal controls, offering recommendations for improvement. External auditors can rely on these evaluations to gauge the effectiveness of controls and determine the extent of testing needed during their audit. 4th, examination of financial and operating information. Internal auditors review how financial and operating information is identified, measured, classified, and reported. External auditors can use these reviews to verify the accuracy and completeness of financial statements and other reports. 5th, review of operating activities. Internal auditors assess the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of operating activities. External auditors can rely on these reviews to understand operational performance and identify areas that could have financial implications. And lastly, compliance with laws and regulations. Internal auditors examine compliance with laws, regulations, and management policies. External auditors can use these reviews to ensure the entity is adhering to relevant legal and regulatory requirements, which is vital for accurate financial reporting. Next, we will discuss current issues regarding internal auditors, ISA 610. Today, we will focus on the issue of the Financial Reporting Council (FRC) decision and its relevance to ISA 610. The Financial Reporting Council (FRC) has introduced a new measure to create a clearer division of responsibility between internal and external audit teams. This change aims to safeguard against conflicts of interest and enhance the independence of external audits. The core issue lies in the potential conflict of interest when internal auditors are directly involved in the external audit process. Some jurisdictions prohibit external auditors from using internal auditors for direct assistance to preserve auditor independence. For instance, the UK's Financial Reporting Council prohibits such practices to enhance auditor independence. Now, let's discuss how this development ties into ISA 610, the international standard that governs the use of internal auditors by external auditors. ISA 610 provides guidelines on how external auditors can use the work of internal auditors. According to ISA 610, external auditors can rely on the work of internal auditors, provided that internal auditors are competent and independent. However, under the FRC's new rule, the role of internal auditors is limited. External auditors are still allowed to examine internal auditors' work, but internal auditors themselves cannot be part of the external audit team. This restriction helps to ensure that the external audit remains independent and that the audit opinion is not influenced by internal audit staff with close ties to the company being audited. This decision aligns with the principles in ISA 610, which stresses the importance of maintaining a clear separation between internal and external audit roles to avoid conflicts of interest. We just covered the internal auditor, so now is the time to jump into auditor's experts. Auditor's expert can be defined as an individual or organization possessing expertise in a field other than accounting or auditing, whose work in that field to assist the auditor in obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence and decrease the risk that material misstatement will not be detected. Auditor's expert may be either internal or external expert. Have you guys ever think what matters need to be expertise? Here are the list of it. First is the valuation of complex financial instruments, the actual calculation of insurance contracts or employee benefit plans, the estimation of oil and gas reserves, and etc. So now let's move to the criteria for auditor's expert that external auditor can rely on, audit procedures to rely on work of others. An auditor's expert needs to be competent, capable, and objective if their services are to be deemed adequate for the audit purpose. Let's deal with each of these attributes. Competence relates to the nature and level of expertise of the expert. Clearly, any expert employed should have widespread recognition of their expertise in the stated discipline. This criteria also to obtain and review the expert's credentials, certifications, and professional experience. Capability relates to the expert's ability to exercise that competence in the circumstance of the audit engagement. For example, the expert must have the time and resources available to perform the task in hand. Auditor expert should inquire about prior work with the client and evaluate any potential conflicts of interest. Objectivity relates to the possible effects that bias, conflict of interest, or the influence of others may have on the judgment of the expert. If an expert has a vested interest in expressing anything other than objective opinion with regard to the subject matter, then their opinion will be of no value to the auditor. This also can assess the expert's reputation and standing within their professional field. If an auditor's expert does not fulfill the requirement in respect of each of the above attributes, the risk of error or inaccuracy in the work carried out is increased, and therefore the objective of minimizing the risk of not detecting material misstatement may not be achieved. Consequently, the auditor's quality control procedures should ensure that internal experts, who are part of the audit engagement team, are capable, competent, and objective. Where an audit firm is seeking to engage a new internal expert or alternatively rely on the services of an external expert, information about the competence, capability, and objectivity of the expert may be sought from various sources. For this section, we will discuss some aspects that can be relied on auditor's expert based on ISA 620 using the work of others, MIA. The auditor may obtain an understanding of the auditor's expert's field of expertise that's relevant to the auditor's understanding by considering whether expert's field has areas of specialty within it that are relevant to the audit, the application of any professional or other standards and regulatory or legal requirement, the method and assumption used either generally accepted for financial reporting purposes or vice versa. Hence, it may the nature, scope, and objective of auditors' experts' work vary, depends on circumstances faced and needs formality of agreement between auditor and auditor's expert, regardless of whether the expert is an auditor's external expert or an auditor's internal expert. The competence, capabilities, and objectivity of the auditors may affect the level of detail and formality of the agreement between the auditor and the auditor's expert. There are some factors shows the need of detailed agreement for the agreement to be set out in writing form, such as accessibility of auditor's expert to confidential information, different respective roles or responsibilities of both auditor and the expert, complexity of the auditor's expert's works matters and work of the expert that not performed by the auditor. If there is no formal written agreement between both auditors and the experts, some evidence need to be included, such as planning memoranda and the policies and procedure of the auditor's firm. After considering the factors of formality needs in the agreement between the auditor and the expert, there are other important aspects on making the agreement, includes the aspect of nature, scope and objectives of work, respective roles and responsibilities, communication and confidentiality of provision by both auditor and the expert. First and foremost, agreeing on the nature, scope and objectives of the auditor's expert's work are needed to include the discussion of any relevant technical performance standards or professional requirements that the expert will follow. Secondly, the agreement on the respective roles and responsibilities of the auditor and the auditor's expert are necessary to include it to know whether the auditor or the expert will perform testing of source data, the consent to discuss the auditor's expert's findings and conclusions discussion with the entity and others, and consider any agreement to inform the auditor's expert of the auditor's conclusions concerning the expert's work. Thirdly, the effectiveness of two-way communication that can facilitate proper integration of the nature, timing and extent the auditor's expert's procedures with other work on the audit. And lastly, the needs of the confidentiality provisions of relevant ethical requirements that apply to the auditor and also to apply to the auditor's expert. In evaluate the adequacy of auditor's expert's work, the auditor's evaluation of the auditor's expert's competence, capabilities and objectivity, its familiarity with the auditor's expert's field of expertise, and the nature of the work performed by the auditor's expert affect the nature, timing and extent of audit procedures to evaluate the adequacy of that expert's work for the auditor's purposes. Hence, there are some aspects to be considered to evaluate the adequacy of the auditor's expert's work, include the procedures on findings and its conclusion of the experts like inquiries, and reviewing the auditor's experts' working papers and reports. The reasonableness of the findings or conclusions of the auditor's expert, whether in a report or other form, and assumptions or methods used in works and inadequate work management in overall. Let's get in depth all the aspects. Firstly, there are some procedures on findings and its conclusion of auditor's experts, such as inquire the findings that have by the auditor's expert, review the auditor's expert's working papers and reports, consider the corroborative procedures such as observe expert's work, examine statistical reports and reperform calculation, as well as discuss the report with management. Before proceed to the procedures stated, there are also factors of relevance on the findings, and its conclusion of auditor's experts include the findings that presented in a consistent standard manner of expert's profession, The findings are clearly expressed, the reference and the objectives agreed with the auditor, and the findings are based on appropriate consideration of errors or deviations encountered by the auditor's expert. For assumptions, methods, and source data, if the auditor's expert's work is to evaluate assumptions and methods in developing accounting estimate, the auditor's procedures are directed to evaluate whether the auditor's expert has adequately reviewed those assumptions and methods. If the expert's work is to develop an auditor's point estimate or range for management's point estimate, the auditor's procedures may direct it to evaluate assumptions and methods used by the expert. For assumption aspect, when the auditor's expert's work involves the use of significant assumptions and methods, some factors that are relevant to be considered for the auditor's evaluation include whether the method are generally accepted within the auditor's expert's field and the assumption or methods are consistent with the requirements of the applicable financial reporting framework. Moreover, usage of source data that is significant to that expert's work, procedures such as the following may be used to test that data, like the verification of the data, the internal controls over the data, and reviewing the data for completeness and internal consistency. Last but not least, for inadequate work which the work of the expert is not appropriate for auditor's purposes and cannot be resolved. The matter through additional audit procedures are required to be performed by both auditors and the experts. Plus, it is necessary to express modified opinion in auditor's report because the auditor has not obtained sufficient appropriate audit evidence before. Next, we will be discussing a current issue involving auditors' experts for ISA 620. We will focus specifically on the issue of the Carillion collapse in the year 2018 and how auditor reliance on expert opinions contributed to the company's downfall. Carillion was one of the largest construction and facilities management companies in the UK, responsible for significant projects like building schools, hospitals, and government infrastructure. However, in January 2018, Carillion went bankrupt with £7 billion, equal to $8.4 billion of debt, leaving workers unemployed and creditors unpaid. Carillion had many long-term projects and hired experts to estimate the profitability of these contracts. However, the experts provided overly optimistic reports, predicting high profits despite signs of cost overruns and delays. The problem was that some of these experts had close ties to Carillion, which made their estimates unreliable. KPMG was Carillion's auditors who relied on these expert reports without questioning their accuracy or the independence of the experts. When Carillion went bankrupt, it was revealed that many projects were losing money or delayed, and the expert reports had been incorrect. KPMG should have been more cautious in relying on these reports to prevent misrepresenting Carillion's financial health. As a result, KPMG was hit with a record $25.7 million fine by UK accountancy regulator, the Financial Reporting Council, after years of serious auditing errors. ISA 620 requires auditors to ensure that any experts they rely on are competent, independent, and that their work is reliable. In the case of Carillion, the experts used by the company were not fully independent. Some had ties to Carillion, which raised concerns about their objectivity. The auditors, KPMG, failed to question the overly optimistic estimates provided by these experts and did not closely examine their work. By not adhering to ISA 620, KPMG missed crucial errors in Carillion's financial statements, ultimately contributing to the company's collapse in 2018. In conclusion, the Carillion case serves as a critical reminder of the importance of ISA 620 and the auditor's responsibility to ensure the competence, independence, and reliability of any expert work relied upon in the audit process. The Carillion scandal also serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of rigorous auditing standards and ethical practices within the accounting profession. The implications of ISA 620 underscore the necessity for auditors to critically assess expert contributions and maintain professional skepticism throughout their audits. As regulatory reforms unfold in response to this scandal, it remains crucial for auditors and firms alike to prioritize transparency and accountability in their practices. KPMG's failure to properly evaluate the work of Carillion's experts led to the acceptance of flawed valuations, which misrepresented the company's financial health. This contributed directly to Carillion's eventual collapse, emphasizing the need for auditors to adhere to ISA 620 to maintain the integrity of financial reporting and prevent similar failures in the future. That's all from us, Group 4. Thank you for your cooperation.